Welcome to Shrink to Shrink, a psych view on the films with Dr. Colleen Mullen and Courtney Calkins, bringing lessons learned from the big screen into our own lives.
Well, howdy, everyone. This is Courtney, and I'm here with Dr. Colleen Mullen, and we are celebrating the Christmas. Are we insensitive, or should I even start with that? If we just talk about Christmas, well, in order to do that, come on in, Colleen.
Hi, Courtney. Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah, so we're talking about the holidays this time, and this time we picked a Christmas movie.
Yeah, holidays insofar as it's Christmas. I always feel bad, although I was thinking about it because we're recording soon after Thanksgiving, and I was thinking, that's a holiday you can say Happy Thanksgiving to people, right? Without fear of repercussion from being racially insensitive, or am I missing the boat?
No, I think you're right. I think we still have Happy Thanksgiving. We don't have, depending on how much you play into the memes around social media, you can't say Merry Christmas to people. I don't know. I do.
Yeah.
And I don't know. What do you guys do even around, we're in mental health, and there's so many therapists out there that won't even acknowledge that the holidays are happening because some people are depressed during that time. I remember just feeling really guilted by other therapists when I put up a little Christmas tree and some decorations because I like a festive holiday scene.
Yeah, I mean, it depends. I mean, we around the office, because we have a variety of different programs. They're not all therapy, but they're all therapeutic related. We decorate. And if I say Merry Christmas to someone and they say Happy Hanukkah, I'll say, oh, Happy Hanukkah.
Exactly.
If I went to Israel, I guess, and I said Merry Christmas and they said Happy Hanukkah, I'd go, okay, Happy Hanukkah. Or I just start saying whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to wish the holiday that people want on each other. You know what I mean? I don't want to wish my holiday on someone.
Right. And I think I err to the side of have a happy holiday, but definitely I'll say Merry Christmas to people too. And I like the decorations, and I like to acknowledge that it is this season. And, because on the therapeutic end of things, even the connection that the clients have with their therapist, that's something that's positive, and you can find some redeeming things and connections with people, even when you feel alone a lot of times. So I don't know. I think a lot is made out. I think too much of a big deal is made out of the actual words that we're saying. And I think if we look at what's the intention behind it, the intention is about wishing someone well. It's about saying, gosh, I hope that you have a nice season and that, you're around people that you care about. It's all that.
Yeah, I agree. You have to look at the intent. If someone's going, Merry Christmas, because they know you're Jewish, you're like, okay, that's kind of rude. But by and large, that's not why people do it. Well, we are reviewing or using Four Christmases, the Vince Vaughn and Renee Zellweger film, to discuss...
Reese Witherspoon.
What did I say? Renee Zellweger?
Renee Zellweger.
Whatever. Some blonde lady who's a famous person. I wrote it down even, and I didn't even... whatever.
Know, it's written right there.
Written right in front of me. When it came out, I didn't even see it. Did you see it when it came out?
No, I didn't. I don't even know that I've heard of it, but I love Vince Vaughn. I think he's really funny.
Yeah.
Reese Witherspoon is really adorable in all of her movies. So I was like, oh, this should be fun. And it was a fun movie. And we're not here to review good or bad, but it was a fun movie. It was very cute. It was adorable. It was kind of slapstick.
Yeah.
I know you didn't really have the same impression, but I enjoyed it.
I heard it for what we're going to do with it.
Right.
Besides that, to be honest, there were parts I fast forwarded. I'm like, okay, I see where this is going when he's falling off the roof and pulling the cable. I'm like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, it's very slapstick.
Yeah, which is fine, but it just wasn't what I was looking for. Are there any holiday movies or Christmas movies or holiday movies that particularly get your heart? I have to see A Christmas Story and I have to see The Grinch. Those are two that I have to see.
Yes, The Christmas Story is right up there. And what else? I like the Charlie Brown Christmas, and Home Alone's cute. So, and then It's a Wonderful Life, or Miracle on 34th Street, for talking old ones.
Yeah.
That one I grew up with, and that one, I haven't seen it in years, but even saying it makes me go, oh, I'd want to watch that this year.
Yeah, I see the smile on your face, actually, when you say it. So,
yeah. All
right, so let's jump right in with some of the wonderful things about the holiday season, and maybe it has to do with lying to your family.
Oh, Big Bad Brad. Hey. How you guys doing?
Look at this. How are you? You with my girlfriend Kate.
How are you?
Stan and Eric.
Yeah.
So what are you guys doing for Christmas?
I got the entire family flying in. 13 airport pickups. 4 days of listening to how gifted my nieces are. My brother thinks his daughter, the 4-year-old, is going to be the next Beyonce. She's bad. And she sucks.
I'm vacationing in tropical Albany this year with Trisha's family. They got us a cot, which is awesome, but we'll probably end up sleeping on the musty couch in the basement with the cats, all 7 of them. Oh, and we get to be there the whole week.
Kind of sounds like a prison sentence.
Why do you guys put yourselves through that?
It's Christmas, right? Don't you have to?
We don't need to do it anymore.
And we don't. We absolutely don't do it anymore.
No, we're done.
Why, what are you doing?
We're going to Fiji.
Yeah.
Just the 2 of us.
Fiji.
Yeah.
Don't your families get upset?
Not if you tell them you're doing charity work. You know, something like building houses in third world countries.
Teaching English as a second language in Puerto Rico, delousing orphans in Somalia, helping Chinese kids capture lobsters, broil them, gut them, clean the weird stuff out of the middle. So I mean, we find that the more details you give, kind of throws them off the set.
You lie to your families at Christmas time.
I mean, you really can't spell families without lies.
Try it.
But don't you ever feel guilty?
For taking a vacation on our vacation? No, not really.
You do look pretty sexy with a tan.
Thanks, babe.
Wow. You can't spell families without lies. I love it. I never thought about that before.
To be honest, I hadn't either. I thought that was a great line. And they actually repeat it, like his father then says it to him, so you see where he gets it from later in the movie. But what do you think of that whole thing of avoiding the families at the holidays?
Well, my family listens. So no, I think to me, I'm not one for doing things that I don't want to do very often. You know, aside from work and the things you got to do. But by and large, if there's a social event or something that I've been invited to, like you probably have the same thing. You get invited to these fundraising dinner things, and I'm like, you know what? I'll buy a seat, but I don't want to go. I hate small talk with strangers. By and large, though, the if I was to, it really did sound appealing, though. For it's like, oh, okay, Fiji'd be nice. But as far as lying to get there, I'd be more likely to tell the truth, which might paint me in a bad light, than lie. But what do you think? I mean,
I have avoided the holidays for a long time. So I actually just went home to New York 2 weeks ago, and I did feel a little guilty this year. So I do a Friendsgiving out here in California, and as I was driving there the other day, I did call my mother and say, maybe next year I'll come by. It'll be nice to come for Christmas. So this morning, though, I even looked and I thought maybe I'd surprise them for Christmas. The airlines, that's why I don't go back, I think, because the airline, the price is double what I just paid for it in October. It's double to fly in for Christmas. Yeah. So I think there was that off-putting, financially off-putting, like, why am I going to pay $750 to go in and have dinner when I could pay $350 2 months earlier? So, I mean, there's that, but I had not thought of lying and saying I was doing charity work like that. I thought was really fun. But I think, where it happened for me in the split, and I think a lot of people do that, is that my parents divorced when I was well into my 30s. And they divorced, and all of a sudden my father moved to another state. So here I was living in California, and I was now going to have to take one vacation to go to New York to visit one parent, and then I was going to have to take another vacation to go to Florida to visit another parent. And I thought, why am I going to do that? And I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, the parents are the ones that split. They should come to you, is what, and I just thought, well, I'm self-employed. Why would I use up all my vacation time to go visit them when they made these choices? They can come to me. We can Skype in for dinner. We can do whatever. So, I think a lot of people, when you have like, this is 4 Christmases, because there are 2 sets of divorced parents, and they're lucky enough that apparently they just drove 5 minutes and were with all of them in different parts of town, apparently, according to the movie.
So it seems.
But most of us are not that lucky. And, and I think for me, the divide happened well into my 30s. I think for people who grow up with 4 sets of parents, essentially to visit, that becomes quite the emotional chore. because every set of parents comes with their own emotional baggage that you have to get ready for.
Right. And I think that if you have two, you get married, right? So now we had to decide, what are we doing? Are we going to do this with my wife's family? Are we going to do this with my family? How are we going to arrange it? And what we've really settled on doing is we just say, this is what we're doing for Christmas. You guys are welcome to join us, or whatever. Or, obviously we can't just always plant our stakes at our house and say, come to us if you want to see us. But, by and large, especially when you have kids, you have that excuse, right? The little ones, you're like, well, I'm not going to travel with them, and they have school and I have work. And so it makes it a little bit easier to draw the grandparents and everybody closer to you when you have the kids as an excuse. But there still is that balance. When two people get married, they come together, and sometimes people do it. One has Thanksgiving one year, to go odds and evens or whatever. They might not be so organized, but something along those lines where you have to divide because you have the two married people.
And I'm feeling like, just so that people are listening and don't think I totally avoid my family, I actually send for them, and I have them come out and stay with me, usually for weeks at a time. So we plan it out. I get my fill of them, they get their fill of me, and then we go back to our lives. It just happens that it's only occasionally over the holidays when we see each other. It's usually other times of the year.
Now that we're talking about this, there's one thing that I think that is really interesting that I learned when I was going to school and had lived out in my own life. And you realize that when my wife pointed it out very, very astutely the first few times we were with my family, is when I go home, I turn into a somewhat different person, right? I turn into a son.
Yes.
I turn into, a little brother to my big sister. And like the first time we were driving away from a big family gathering, my wife looked at me and said, who the heck are you? Why were you so different around them? And I'm like, I wasn't. I don't think. And then as I thought back about it, and I went on and, then I went into therapy school and learned about that stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm putting on different personas, and they're all me, but I have these different roles and ways that I behave around different people, that especially when you are going back to your family of origin, you have, there's Bowen does, a therapy type where you go, either he does it through letter writing, or you go and visit your family, and you kind of see how long you can hold on to your adult, that adult part of each one of us before you slide back into your earlier role as a child or a brother or whatever.
I often talk with my clients when they're going to a holiday gathering, or they're going back, home to wherever home is, to visit a parent who they might not have had like a great relationship with. We talk about, how are you going to take care of yourself? We talk about all the trigger points. So what if your mother says this to you? Or what if your father asks you about that? Or I have younger clients who are getting the whole like, oh, but here, let me fix you up with somebody because you need to start making babies. And that's all part of this movie as well. But, then we talk about, okay, what are good responses to that so that you can hold on to who you are and not get triggered into being a 16-year-old girl screaming at her mother going, stop asking me that.
I don't care about the freaking gravy, Ma.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's also, I watched, now in hindsight, I watched how my uncle navigated it. And now that I've gotten older and a little bit more financially independent, the way that we navigate it is we get a hotel room, because you get a break. You get to go and be part of the events and be there for every single thing you want to, but then you get to leave.
Yes. It's amazing how many people feel that they can't say, Mom and Dad, I'm going to get a hotel room. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's great that you did it. And I do it when I stay there, for whatever reasons, I like to have my own space. So many people say, oh gosh, my mom would be so offended if I do that. And it's like, well, why? Like, you're a grown adult. You've been an adult for over 20 years. Like, get a hotel room. Yeah. Invite them over. Go to the pool. Yeah. Let them use the place and see that this could be, fun for them as well. But they don't, and they end up then getting themselves entangled in these 24/7 emotional, swamps is what I think of them as. They can't get out of them. So they start sinking in the quicksand of the emotional stuff. Then they have to still sit around for dinner. Then they have to watch TV after and make small talk. Then they have to wake up and have breakfast. So if you normally go for a run in the morning, maybe you feel like you can't do that because you need to sit around with the family and have breakfast. Like, it's not normal to spend 24/7 with your parents when you're an adult. It's not something we naturally do. And so I try to encourage people to hold their own little time boundaries on that. Yeah, which I think brings us to our next scene about the exit plan.
Absolutely. And that's one of the benefits of having someone as a partner in crime who you're going, all right, I don't want to be here. But let's hear how, is it Reese Witherspoon?
Yes.
All right, let's see how she and Vince Vaughn plan this.
Listen, if one of these houses gets a little too intense, I think we're going to need an exit strategy.
Oh, yes.
So, we're going to need a word that both of us know that means it's time to leave. So, what do you think our safe word should be?
That's such a good idea. Mistletoe.
Mistletoe's really good.
Okay.
By the way, this house here, my father's house, can get particularly uncomfortable. So please, sweetheart, do not feel embarrassed if you feel the need to pull the ripcord early and say mistletoe if this house gets too uncomfortable for you.
Okay.
Even if we're in there for 10 minutes.
All right. I'll let you know where I'm at.
I'm just looking out for you on this one. I want you to be cool.
Brad, I'm going to go see your dad and your brothers right now.
Unless you're too weird with it, then we're not.
I'm going in.
All right, and going out would be?
Mistletoe.
Done.
Okay, so I found it funny that in each one of these situations, the person who used the safe word was the person whose family they were visiting. It wasn't the...
Because it was really about him.
Yeah, he's like, all right. Because even if I had to let that clip go on, she says, and he's like, and out is mistletoe. And she says, mistletoe. And then he says, okay, so we're out. And he's like, no, let's go inside. Because he really didn't want to be there. And,
right.
I understand it because there's in families, there are people who we sync with and people who we repel. And no matter what, I don't care how great your family is, there are people who you prefer to spend time with and other people who it's harder to be around. And so working with a spouse or a partner in crime, it's saying, hey, if you see me engaged in a big conversation with this, and this can work at a social event too, but we're talking about Christmas and family. If you see me engaged in a long conversation with this person, come over and, rub me on the shoulder and say, hey, I needed to get your opinion on something over here, or, get me out of this, because there are people who I say like ear bash you, right? Where they just start talking. And you're like, okay, this is ridiculous. I never want to be in these conversations, especially in this year. There are people who love to talk about politics and you're like, get me out of this.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, right. And exit plans, I think, are great. I do talk to my clients about having one for almost no matter what kind of event they're going to. And you're right. When you have a partner that can do it, kind of help you along with that, that's great. Sometimes you're going by yourself and you need your own exit plan. Mm-hmm. What are you going to say? Oh, maybe at 10 o'clock, you're going to say, well, I have to get up early in the morning to go to work. So I'm just going to catch my Uber and see you later,
Right.
And
a cell phone can work that way too. I mean,
yes.
I've not done it, but I know many people who have, and I've been tempted to be just all of a sudden you look at your phone and go, oh, hang on just a second. I really got to get this, or I got to respond to this, or I got a crisis brewing over here. Because you just got, and this is all kind of smoke and mirrors, right? It's not coming out and being straightforward as two therapists talking. We're kind of helping people devise kinder, gentler ways out instead of being, because sometimes brutal honesty is not helpful. It's like, you know what? I really don't enjoy talking to you and this conversation is going nowhere. And so I'm going to go over and grab some chicken. You can't really do that and maintain relationships. But if you have an exit plan, then it can definitely help.
And I love how, as you pointed out, Vince Vaughn does the, this is all really about him. The exit plan is more to help him because he's the one who's going to get caught in the emotional quicksand there. Right. It's not going to be Reese Witherspoon because she doesn't have any connection to these people. So that's what it is. And I think when people are doing that, like sometimes the partner doesn't get it. And they don't get that the exit plan is like a necessary thing. And even if they see you kind of reverting back and turning into a different person in front of your family, they still may think, oh, but it's polite to stay. And I think in those situations, before you go in, you need to say to your partner, hey, I really if I say mistletoe, we need to get out of there fast. Mm-hmm. Like there isn't going to be any, let's just stay for dessert. Let's just watch the last movie with them. Let's finish this conversation. It means let's go. Because sometimes, the stop word doesn't really feel like a hard stop to the other person. And because this is about protecting yourself emotionally, you need your partner to really understand when I say stop, it means stop. So, and, or go in this case, right? We need to go.
Let's head out. Yeah. And I realize that I am, as much as I'm an extrovert and social and the rest of it, really I'm an introvert. So in order for me to feel like I got some vacation, or I used my holiday time as downtime, as some restful time, I have to be able to spend time alone or not in a huge social situation. And I don't care how much you love your family or whatever, you're still being social. And it's, for me, that requires a lot of energy. I got to like build myself up, and I don't feel rested after. My wife, on the other hand, extrovert, she gets filled by being with people. She seeks people out. It's great when relatives come over. I'm like, okay, can we put like, you have a starting time for a party? You should have an ending time for a party so that people know it's okay to leave after that time. And for me, being an introvert, that's what I need. I need some downtime in order to refresh and be at my best.
And I think that we're heading into the next scene also, where we're going to talk about some boundaries of family.
Yeah, and some of the memories that get conjured up. No matter what we do, we fall back into those old ways.
Because I don't want to be blindsided again.
Oh, that's very funny. Go ahead and take a shot at me. It's bad enough I have to deal with those Neanderthals, but now I got to take it from you, too?
No, you shouldn't. And you shouldn't let them walk all over you either.
Kate, they are trained UFC fighters. They know pressure points on people.
But you're twice their size.
They're semi-professional cage fighters. Like, one person comes out, one person doesn't. You know what I mean? Like cockfighting, but like with dudes.
I thought you said they were personal
They're
trainers.
dude cockfighters.
Like that thing that you see on the pay-per-view?
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
Except they don't actually get paid for it. They mostly just brawl in people's backyards, and then they upload the footage to YouTube. Honey, my childhood was just like the Shawshank Redemption, except I didn't have some kind, older, soft-spoken, gentle black man to share my struggle with.
But you're not that child anymore, okay? You're a grown, strong, confident, successful man.
Okay, I really don't want to get into this.
Red, let me just let you know the truth. They're intimidated by you. What you need to do is go out there and set some healthy boundaries and demand that they respect you. Do you hear what I'm saying?
Hey, Big City! Time to open up some presents. Come on, son, we gotta go.
This is your opportunity. You can do this, baby.
The best laid plans, huh?
Right. So being, setting those healthy boundaries. And what she means by that really is just to go in there and not, I mean, he was getting beat up by them. It was really like, that's the slapstick part that we're watching. And it was Jon Favreau, who's a great actor, and to see him, in his little wife beaters and whatever, beating up Vince Vaughn was really funny. But it was also, kind of an extreme example of like, he was supposed to walk in there and say, okay, like, you can't treat me like that any longer. Like, I'm not your little brother anymore, kind of thing.
Right. And then he actually ended up getting beat up by his brothers and their kids. And
That's right.
Okay. So as much as you hear that music build at the end of that clip, and she's inspiring you, not that, set these boundaries, and then he starts to get the crap beat out of him. And what does she do? She just stares at him. She doesn't jump in and go, hey, leave my husband alone, or boyfriend or whatever.
Right.
She doesn't do any of that. She doesn't help him, which I would hope that a partner would. But, sometimes you do. You need those other people in your life to kind of bolster you up, to help you take those stands. And I think that's what a good relationship does, is they bring out the parts of you that you want to develop and be stronger for. Because when he was at home, he didn't have his, what we call the adult. He didn't have his adult. He only had these parts of a child that he could only be victim to his brothers and sisters, and they only saw him in that role, and they didn't want to develop. A lot of times, we talk about going back into a home and, trying to maintain, heck, I'm a successful A, B, or C in my everyday life, and I go home and I turn into this whiny, lost little child who feels like they don't do anything in their life. So you need somebody to help you maintain that differentiation, that separation, so you're not pulled into these old roles, because families do. They want you to be in those roles. They want you to be their little baby. They want you to be that person who, like my mom, she's a great caretaker, so she's always getting things for me. I'm like, Mom, I can do it. And it's not that I don't appreciate it, because I've learned to appreciate it after a while, but there's that period of time in your 20s and 30s where you want to go back and say, look, I am not this child anymore. I don't want you to treat me like that child anymore. And then you realize that it's kind of a two-way street, right? Mom feels good when she's mothering me, and I don't have to always be asserting that I'm an adult now and you don't have to treat me like a child. So there's almost this ebb and flow, but families will homeostasis, right? Families want to pull you back. I don't care what change you're making. Families try to pull you back into the old familiar way of behaving.
Oh, absolutely. And I think particularly around the holidays, or when you have to travel to see your family because you don't live close enough to just kind of see them on a regular basis any longer, I think that puts a lot of you have your own anxieties that go on, anticipation of what's it going to be like. And I think that's why we hear so much stress in families around holiday visits. Because it's not that necessarily if you visited your family like next Saturday, it would be quite as stressful. But if you visit them for Thanksgiving and you're flying in, or you're driving a million hours to get there, and you've got your kids in tow or your partner, there's a lot of added pressure to have a great time. And your family might not be equipped to all sit around and just fabulously get along. Most families don't. We're all at that point, once you're in adulthood and you've got siblings who are adults and your parents are now older and having different aspects of their lives, they now haven't parented little kids in a million years. You have, such a different dynamic of all these different adults sitting around with different opinions, different likes and dislikes. And you may not have a lot in common with them anymore, but you are all tied together, and there's a lot of pressure to all look like you're having a fabulous time with each other. And I think that's where we go wrong in our anticipation, but that's where setting the boundaries, having your time limits, knowing what subjects you're going to talk about or not talk about, maybe, especially like currently, there was a lot of stuff flying around about like, well, yeah, how are you going to have talks about politics at the Thanksgiving table? Yeah. Well, you probably shouldn't. Right. If you know it's going to be acrimonious, you probably shouldn't. You should save that for maybe the next day when half the family's gone and you're having casual breakfast with your parents, if you wanted to. Right. But, or find it different, or find some common ground over that rather than taking sides. So anyway, yeah, it's things like that.
So what do you think? You mentioned that, as people anticipate, and we're putting this out at the end of November, beginning of December, and so Christmas is in our sight line.
It'll be less than a month from now.
Yeah, yes. It'll be pretty quick, and it's ahead of us. And you talked about people anticipating these difficult things, and yet I find that if I'm going to do something, I want to rehearse in my head positive outcomes. And yes, I prepare for the negative, but a lot of people, their stress gets so high based on these negative things that they're anticipating, instead of, all right, if this happens, how can I turn this into a positive? And it reduces the stress a lot if you start to picture positive outcomes and, ways to dodge and weave, like we were talking about, different discussions or different stories. I mean, because everybody has the eye-rolling story that, people talk about. I think we get to it a little later, where people talk about the images of who they were as a child and how the parents love to retell those stories. But, what do you think about, people who rehearse over and over these negative things, and it just stresses them out? How would you try to help them in that situation?
Yeah, well, like you were saying, like I would help them try to envision a positive outcome. And if they really couldn't, and if they say, oh, well, it's always a disaster, then I would look at, okay, well, let's figure out why it's always a disaster. And we'll pull out, where's the part where you can get out of a conversation? Where's the part where you can set a different boundary? Where's the part where you can take some time for yourself on that, day? Because even if it's Thanksgiving, go for a walk after Thanksgiving dinner by yourself if you like. You need some space. You need to just kind of get away from everybody for 20 minutes. Go for a walk. Go do something else, and then come back and rejoin everybody. I think because when people anticipate it as like a constant disaster when they visit their family. I think it's because they lose sight of taking care of themselves in any way. I think they go, once I'm in that house, I am theirs, and like almost like a victim to them. So, and we're not even talking about like abusive homes. We're talking about people who just tap into, you know, I hear a lot about, you know, women getting tapped into being like, you know, angry teenagers when they're in their 30s. They'll go home and that'll happen. And we'll say, okay, but where did you lose yourself? Because you're not that woman, you know, you're not that little girl. And so, and guys will do it too. Their fathers can bring stuff out. As you said, mothers can be like overly doting on their sons. And the mother just wants to know that she's still needed. So when you come over, Courtney, and mom's doting on you, she just wants to know that she can still take care of you in some way, and she gets that little smile out of you or something, you know, whereas for you, though, you have a different experience of it because because you're having your experience, she's having hers, and they're not meshing up in those moments. Yeah. So it's a matter of kind of staying very self-aware. So I'd work with somebody on that end to go like, let's pull out little exceptions. Let's pull out little ways that they can do something for themselves in the middle of this event that they feel is for everybody else.
Yeah, and I know one of the ways that I kind of at least have an emergency out, and it's not to leave the party or to avoid family or whatever, but I always like to be able to do I'm the person who goes to the store. You know, we need something, we need some cream cheese, great, I'm there. And then, you know, I can take a little longer if I want, or I can talk to someone who's a friend of mine on the way there or on the way back or whatever that can kind of ground me. You know, it's not like it has to be traumatic, but there's something about just separating yourself, or at least for me, for a few moments that allows me to refresh and, you know, remember who I am outside of the family, because who I am in the family and who I am outside is often different. As I've gotten older and I've, you know, come to grips more with who I am, and family's just going to have to accept that the fact that I'm an adult and these are the ways I'm going to behave, then that's great. There's also other parts that I love. You know, I love going back and being that little brother, and in a family environment, I can pretty much get away with saying anything I want to say. And there's not many environments that I can do that, you know, so when I can go for that.
And they know you in ways that nobody else really does, you know.
They can roll their eyes and goes, oh, there's Courtney again.
Right. And you know what? And there are families, like we're going down the path that the movie took us, but there are families all the time. Like I have cousins who they must have 20 grandkids among the families from my aunts and everything. And when they get together, they do every holiday together. They all travel. They all go to Thanksgiving together. And, you know, there's lots of families where they just really look forward to it, and they do connect well, and they do appreciate all that stuff. I would venture to guess there's a few people among those 40 people that are taking walks by themselves, are out calling their friends at other times as well. So I think that we get, you know, again, like there's a lot of social media around everybody putting on their best faces around the holidays and how great their family is and everything. And I would just say, you know, kind of keep in mind, we're all human. We all have our own emotional experiences, and you do what's necessary for you to enjoy your family in the best way possible during the holiday if you're choosing to go see them.
Yeah, and make sure you follow the rules, especially when there are kids around, like in this next scene where we talk about some gift giving.
I have a feeling that your gift from Santa is going to probably ring in right around $10 too.
Why? Is Santa Claus cheap like my daddy?
No, Santa is Dad. Dad just goes ahead and writes Santa, and what? I don't understand. What's happening? What's happening? What's the problem? What's the problem?
There's no Santa Claus?
Okay, you're joking with me, right? You're kidding with me. They know there's not a Santa Claus, right?
They do now.
How can you lie to us,
Look,
Daddy?
there is a Santa Claus. There is a Santa Claus.
Cody, come on.
Even Santa Claus don't love me.
Look, hey, that's not going to bring back Santa. That's not going to bring...
When he gets to hurting inside and can't use his emotion words, he takes to streaking. Don't worry, he always comes back.
When he can't use his emotion words, he takes to streaking. I've not heard of that before, but it's an interesting movie premise.
Yeah, no, you know, they were stretching it, but okay, it was cute. It's funny.
Yeah, you know what? My wife and I seriously had a real discussion when we had kids who could understand words and Santa and the concept. She actually didn't want... She said, I don't want to lie to my kids. I don't want to tell them about Santa. And I had to say, I said, honey, I do therapy and I do therapy with children. And there's been actually 0 times where children have come in and complained to me about the fact that their parents lied to them about Santa. Santa's a wonderful fantasy. And I wish I believed longer. Right. Like his reaction in the movie was hilarious. What do you mean? There's no Santa, Dad? You lied to me? No, Santa's awesome. To have that anticipation is wonderful. But you also don't want to be that person who's breaking whatever it is family trance that apparently he was breaking by saying there's no Santa.
Now, do you remember being told that there was no Santa by your parents?
No, I believed in Santa until the world told me that there wasn't Santa. And then, now the nice thing is, and I use this with kids all the time, is what movie is it where you hear the bell ring? And it was Tom Hanks, and it was Polar Express. Polar Express is a movie where the people who believe in Santa hear the bell when it rings, like you shake a bell, and when they don't believe in Santa, they don't hear the bell. So you can just
dog whistle.
Basically. So it's an easy way to say, oh, well, that person says there's no Santa. Well, they don't hear the bell anymore. We're still part of the inside club. We're not on the outside like them. They don't think there's a Santa, but we all know because we hear the bell that there's a Santa. So it's almost like you can even perpetuate the mythology of Santa Claus beyond 8 or 9 years old when people typically understand that there's no Santa.
Well, and that's funny because in our family, we had 5 kids and we had like an 8-year age difference. So when my brother and I, who are similar in age, when we got old enough, we were the oldest. And when we got old enough to know, we must have said something to our parents, because I remember that they sat us down at the table and they were like, now don't tell the others. Like, we had these 3 younger siblings and they were like, yeah, okay, fine, it's us, but you can't tell your brothers and your sister.
Yeah.
So we had to keep it. So we would then, our thing was we'd go down and rearrange all the gifts from Santa and take the ones that we wanted for ourselves and give us extra piles. And in the morning, my mother would go, oh, I don't think Santa meant for this gift to be over here. I think Santa meant it to be over in this pile. And
that's hilarious.
We would go and rearrange everything.
So you're playing mom and dad.
Playing a little fat blackmail.
Yeah, you're pushing it a little further, going, well, let's see if I can get this one out of them, because they'll have to say that this is my gift, because otherwise they're going to have to blow the Santa surprise. Boy, you guys were crafty.
Oh, we were a little smart back then. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah. So, I mean, right now, it's easy to say, because no matter what age of a kid, if you say, oh yeah, maybe Santa will get that, and they kind of, around 10, they kind of give you this look like, are you trying to sell me on the fact that there's a Santa when I know there's not one? But it's still always fun.
And I should say, like, as a woman who doesn't have kids, I have had to check with other friends or relatives when I'm going to holiday gatherings to find out who knows that there's Santa and who doesn't. So, because I don't want to be Vince Vaughn in that scene.
Yeah.
And I could easily step into it. So I have actually had to check over the years to be like, well, how old do you tell the kids now? And do they know? Okay. So.
Yeah. Another thing that can happen when you go to family or even at just regular non-family member gatherings around this holiday season is people can make assumptions, and they have ideas and thoughts about who you are and what you believe, and they just kind of weave it into the conversation, and you don't really even get a chance to combat it because they just start off with an assumption like this one does.
This is Courtney's husband, Jim. Take Jackson. Oh, isn't he so good with kids? Yeah. Can you believe we're going to try again?
Well,
Oh, I forgot. You're too cool for kids. It cramps your independence.
Oh, no, I never said I was too cool for kids.
Honey, I know you didn't say it, but you don't have any. And you have really strong, concrete ideas about not having any.
Well, that's actually not... you know what? I'd rather just not get into it. Where's Cassie?
So she handles it well. I just don't want to get into it.
Right. That's a good, healthy boundary.
Right. And so I'm sure being of your age and not having children, you've had to encounter things like that all the time, because traditional is you get married, you have kids. It's not even far long after the reception that people are going, how long do you guys have kids? They just assume that you're going to do it. How have you managed to combat people's assumptions?
I have to tell you, when I meet new people in social gatherings who are just asking basic questions, it's within the top 5 things that I get asked. I get asked it all the time.
Do they ask, do you have kids, or how many kids?
Do you have kids? And when I say no, then they actually go, oh, why?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I don't really know you, and I don't really know I want to give you 25 years of my life history to explain how this hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it gets personal real quick,
it happens
right?
all the time. And now, like, even tipping my toe in the dating world, guys will ask and they'll say, well, how come? And I'm like, oh, well, I thought we'd save this for like a second date, you know? And it's one of these things that people just ask. But I think conversely, though, I mean, I probably do the same thing. I probably say, oh, do you have kids? Like, right. Depending on what setting I meet people in. But I don't think of somebody, because I know enough on the female side of things where either it just didn't happen for years. I've known friends that have taken every supplement and vitamin and acupressure and everything else to try to make it happen, and it just didn't happen. And I know that that's a can of worms for a lot of people. You can't just go, oh, you didn't want them, that's why you're this age and don't have them. There's a lot behind it. So I usually don't say, why don't you, if they don't.
Right.
But I also think, like, now that I'm kind of feeling that more so that I'm in this new stage of my life, I think I'm going to avoid asking that, because I don't want it reflected back onto me either then, because then I'm inviting people to ask me if I have kids.
Right.
And it makes no real difference in the context of most of the ways that I'm meeting people, that whether or not I have kids, whether it's in my business networking or in social parties that I go to or whatever, it really doesn't make a difference, because I'm there for other reasons.
I think it would be really interesting to flip it around if you get that question. Say, oh, well, then what inspired you to have kids? Because I think you get a lot of hamana. You know, it's because, like, well, I don't know. It's just kind of like the next thing, right? I was a junior in high school and I just went on to be a senior in high school. I was married and then I had kids. Why did I have kids?
I was going to say, and you know, like, from all the work that we do with couples and stuff, of course, we always have to ask, well, was that child planned? Or we get a lot of, well, this one wasn't, but the next one was, you know, and things like that. And yeah, I think for my own personal bias, I don't get into, because I think it's so personal for everybody. So I prefer not to, but it's interesting. Like, I was just out of town a few days and, you know, meeting some people and stuff. And I was even asked then, I remember thinking, did he really just ask me why I don't have kids? Like, it was just a really odd setting.
Yeah, it seems really innocuous or benign to ask that question, but the answer is so emotionally loaded.
Yes.
You know, and she didn't even ask in this clip. She didn't even ask. She's like, well, you have very strong opinions and you're too cool for kids. So, okay.
Yes. And that happens. I'll say that assumption of, like, you think you're better than us because you chose not to is something that does get projected onto people like myself who just for whatever reason don't have kids, and we're past the age of making them, I think. And so, you know, I think people project onto us like, oh, well, you just, you know, just thought you were going to have a different life, you know, and as if we look down on people that have kids. And I think to each his own. And I mean, there's a lot of great families out there, and I guess without going into it, like, I'm here just without kids, whether it was a choice or not.
Right.
So.
Right. And
yeah.
it's not because you're too cool. You know,
no, not at all.
I think sometimes, as a person who has kids, I think sometimes it'd be like almost like a certain amount of jealousy to a certain degree. I mean, I love my kids. I'm glad I have them, the whole thing. But I do wonder, it's like, wow. First of all, how much money would I have if I didn't have kids? You know, and how much would my life be different and my weekends be different? Because by definition, you have to kind of reorient yourself around your children. And so sometimes I look at people who have either decided or for whatever reason don't have kids, that I'm like, man, that would kind of be cool just to kind of be like this couple in the movie of Four Christmases, where you can just go, you know what? I don't care about Santa. I don't care about stringing up a Christmas tree. I don't care about lights. I don't care about presents. I'm going to go on a vacation during Christmas, and I'm not even going to worry about having to make it all about Santa and the rest of it.
And on that end, like, I do know that I probably have at least one friend that I can think of that I know is just kind of like, are you staying home this weekend? Like, or because I go away a lot on the weekends, and I feel like at this point in my life, like, that's how I want to live. I want to see things, I want to explore, I want to do things. And because I didn't end up with kids, I feel like, well, I can do these things. So I do know that I have a friend in particular I can think of that I'm sure she's just like, okay, Colleen, like, are you staying home? Because and I'm always like, oh, do you need help with the kids? I'll come over and babysit. And it's just like, no, I don't. Like, you go out and live your life.
Yeah, freedom. All right, so there's another assumption that people make, and we get to embrace it head on here.
Mm-hmm.
So when's the big day?
I'm sorry?
We're getting married in the spring in South Carolina. Yeah. What about you guys?
Oh, we're not getting married.
Oh. So why are you taking dance classes?
We do a lot of stuff together. That's just one of many things that we do together.
Yeah, it's fun.
In fact, I can't think of anything that we don't do together.
Right. So why wouldn't you want to get married?
Well,
we're happy.
We're happy,
Yeah.
and I love her. So marriage just kind of brings pressure and stress and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, we don't want our relationship to turn into work. We just want to be together because we enjoy it, not because we have to, you know?
It's like there's a reason that they use the expressions tying the knot or ball and chain.
Have you ever listened to the words of a marriage ceremony? Like a promise to obey? Or till death do us part?
I mean, I'd rather be like stuck on an island with some weird millionaire hunting me, trying to kill me, and me trying to escape than to be involved in something with those kind of slogans, because that's like a time bomb waiting to explode.
So what about children? You do want to make them, no?
No.
No.
I don't want to make them.
Mm-mm.
I just don't want to, like, be responsible for this kid and hurt their feelings and disappoint them.
Yeah, that's what happened with our families.
We're both from families that are divorced. We've seen it play out. We don't need to repeat the pattern. But anyway, congratulations on getting married. That sounds like a really cool thing, and to each their own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
One of the things that struck me at the beginning of that clip is that he just says that everything's going good and we really love each other, and so we don't want to get married. And in this day and age, it's very, very common. People live together. They're together a long time before they entertain the idea of becoming married or taking that next step to commit yourself for a lifetime to another person until death do you part and all the rest of it. But one thing I think that I think most people experience who have lived together and have kind of simulated this marriage type environment is that when you do get married, your psychology, your beliefs often change. It's like all of a sudden you've gone from being a boyfriend or a significant other to a husband or a wife, and those words carry, even if you don't know it and you try to resist it, they carry meaning, and it tends to change relationships surprisingly. Have you ever found that?
Yes. Oh, certainly personally and professionally. And I think once it becomes legal and you've committed and you're bound to this other person, you start thinking are we really both living a life that has the same goals or goals that are, in agreement with them? Is this person going to be a healthy partner for the next 50 years? I certainly do think it changes. I would venture to guess that there's going to be people who are in long-term living together arrangements that would really feel strongly that they are married in all senses of the word. And I absolutely agree with that people can live like that. I do think once you do the legal part of it starts to twist up how you think sometimes. And I think for some people, it actually twists them up in a way that makes them no longer a decent partner. It kind of screws their head up because they go, oh, what did I do? I just locked myself in. And I think that's what the characters are referring to in that part. Like Vince Vaughn says, yeah, we don't want to screw anything up. We like this, that there's a sense of choice. And I think a lot of people that do the long-term living together as opposed to getting married, they have that sense of, well, we're making a choice to be together. We're not legally bound to do it. So if we stay together but unmarried, then every day that we're together is a choice to be together. So it kind of makes their bond stronger is what they're insinuating. We're here because we're choosing to. Right. You have to just withstand all the bad stuff because you're legally obligated to.
And I think there's definitely some of that. I mean, I would say that it's probably true that if my wife and I weren't married, we still wouldn't be together. I often think, like as I work with divorcing couples, we know that and at least in California, you cannot be divorced except for until 6 months and 1 day past the day you file for a divorce. And so they make you, I don't care if everything's agreed, you can't get divorced for that amount of time. And I look at it from a therapist's side and say, but you can get married in Vegas, in 2 seconds. How come we don't?
And you can get divorced in 2 months. It's just crazy.
Yeah, in other
how
states.
fast you can do it in other places.
Right, and so, but back to what I was saying about staying together. I think that marriage commitment forced me to hang in, and my wife and I come from different family makeups. My parents are still together, and her mom was married, I don't know, 3-4 times, something like that. And so, she was an easier out than me. She would look at it and go, maybe this isn't working. Maybe we should get divorced. I'm like, well, wait, it isn't working. So let's keep trying. So it was just a different mentality. And if we weren't married, if we were just living together, we probably would have just been, all right, let's just live separate. But there's something to, and it's true for every type of relationship. It's not necessarily, just a romantic or, marriage type relationship that if you go through trials,
business partnership is like that as well,
right? It's not easy to separate, and but after you've been through some trauma together or difficult situations and you come out the other side, you know that you're stronger for it. I mean, after your first argument with somebody, if you get back together with them and say, gosh, you know what, sorry, I really screwed up, I shouldn't have said this and I shouldn't have said that, I apologize for what I did here and there, you go, oh, okay, I've got someone who I can get through difficult situations with, and it tends to put you more at ease. So, and that's why I think long-term relationships, I have a friend who I've known since 8th grade, he's my best friend because we've been through a lot of ups and downs together, and we know that no matter what, we're going to come back together and still be, friends and have a good relationship. And so there's something about that I think that commitment helps, but I think at other times, we've all known couples who are stayed together because of the kids, or stayed together because, or they hated each other. And there's lots of people who don't get married because they watch their parents live in misery because, well, I got this ring on my finger and we all made a pledge in front of God and all our family members. And I don't think there's any good solution to that. But
and we also know now that kids that are raised in families where the parents stay together for the kids and they really are resentful of each other, and the kids see that, and so that's not healthy for the kids, and in fact doesn't reflect a healthy relationship example for them later on in life. So I don't know about you, but I know when I have clients that are in that stage of life, we talk about the realities of what it's going to look like if they were to stay together, or if they were to, in a healthy way, split apart. Then be healthier co-parents as opposed to really resentful parents in the same house.
Yeah, that's what I tell the families who I'm working with who are getting divorced, the parents. I say, there are plenty of healthy kids, because when people are getting divorced and they have kids, their number one worry is not necessarily their finances. It's, how are my kids going to do this? I don't want to hurt my kids, because I'm sure as they've sat awake late at night contemplating whether they actually are going to do this divorce thing or talk to their friends or whatever, their biggest concern is, I don't want to hurt my kids. I don't want my kids to be damaged. And I tell them the number one indicator of kids getting through their parents being divorced is how their parents get along through the divorce and after.
Right. Well, you and I grew up in a time where there were commercials even about, I think it might have been because the divorce rate was so high in the 70s and the early 80s, that there were even commercials or things going around. It must have been on TV because there was no internet back then.
Back in the day.
About how bad kids from divorced families would turn out, that they were going to be high school dropouts, they were going to be drug addicts, all these things that, in fact, now you and I both help couples who are divorcing. And I've spoken at a workshop and found research that cites just the opposite. And as you're exactly right. It's how well the parents divorce, how well they split up and the examples they show, because the lesson in life is that not every relationship is meant to be forever.
Right.
It doesn't sustain itself. And it is sometimes much healthier to break it apart and just kind of figure out how to move on from there. But so a lot of the parents that are getting divorced now are of our age and our generation and or raised by people our age.
Yeah.
And well, we're not quite having kids marrying ages yet, but close to it, I guess.
Close.
We have to kind of debunk those myths that we grew up with, that they're going to wreck their kids' lives.
Yeah, there is such thing as a healthy divorce. People.
That's right.
They don't think about it like that. Okay, so when you go back into a family situation, we alluded to this earlier. Sometimes families love. Like I met a family the other day, and I think he was 9 years old, about right around 9 or 10 years old, and I met his mom, and the first thing she said told me about this disease he had when he was 2 that he doesn't have anymore. And then I talked to someone else about the family, and they're like, oh, they told you that? They told me that too. So everybody has these stories that they love to tell about this little child. I'm like, how did that become this kid's identity? Is it he had this disease and he suffered through it and he survived? I'm like, he's 10 years old. He's done a lot of things since then, things that he's actually accomplished. And you lead with, well, he was sick. I was like, okay, that I don't know why that matters. But Kate in this movie has a story that gets told about her.
That's Kate always hated the jump jump. In the 5th grade, a bunch of kids trapped Kate inside the jump jump, and she never got over it.
I got over it. They tortured her for about an hour.
Why would they trap you in there that long?
Because she was Cootie Kate. Courtney.
Who's Cootie Kate?
She didn't tell you about Cootie Kate?
Mom, I really don't think this is necessary. All the kids pretended that Kate had cooties, and no one talked to her. But if Kate even touched you, you would have to wipe it off and spray with disinfectant to get out the cooties.
That sounds like it could be really hurtful. How long did that go on for?
Not long. I don't remember, but it wasn't long. 7 years, K through 6.
Her sister remembers right off. 7 years, K through 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
now, Courtney, have you been in a situation like that where your parents tell these stories that are either embarrassing to you for your kids or when you were dating your wife? Do you have any stories that are like those things that you're never going to live down?
I if there are, I'm trying to, as you pose the question, I'm like, okay, what is there? I mean, I'm sure they do have different things, but what I do with stuff like that is instead of resisting it, I run towards it. I'm like, hell yeah, I had cooties. I mean,
I do too.
I remember so when I was in grade school, they had this rhyme that they would make up. It was Courtney Calkins, king of the kookiest kids. And I was like, oh man. So they would just tease me with this. And so it went on for, several months. And the way it ended was I went, wait a minute, let's think about this song, kids. I'm the king and you're the kookiest kids. So you can make up whatever song you want, but I'm king in this. So I just learned how to embrace it instead of going, shut up, guys, stop it. So that there were these things, and so I just learned to embrace it like, hell yeah, that's it. That's what I was, but that's not, I had cooties, but I had cooties because I was the hottest kid around. Nobody knew how to, what I mean? I just teach, and that's how I had to teach my kids to deal with bullies. I'm like, all right, because my kid's on YouTube, and so he gets all kinds of bullies, in the comment section, all the rest of it. And everybody has, bullying has been around forever. And I don't think we're ever really going to get rid of it because kids are idiots and they're mean and they don't know how mean they're being when they're actually being that mean and how traumatizing they're being to other people. So we do have to educate them. And just for the record, I'm anti-bully. I'm taking a big stand here on the show. Anti-bully. I'm not pro-bully.
Well, good to hear that.
Yes, yeah. So, but I do. I teach my kids to try to embrace whatever it is that people are saying, because whenever someone has this power over you, where if they can reveal this secret or tell this silly thing about you, if you recoil, then they're only going to use it to get you more. I mean, I had a big sister. She would beat up on me and verbally and otherwise, and so I learned how to just power through it. Now, Colleen, you asked me about my childhood. Do you have anything like that? Stories that get told?
Well, I have a brother who every time, and we're best pals, and every time I go to New York or he comes out here, he is the first one to jump on these stories from when we were kids, and he'll tell the story. He just did it. I was there 2 weeks ago. We're sitting around the dinner table with all of our friends. We're out for the night, and he's cracking us up, telling about how he used to chase me around the house with the toy, the big toy box, and chase me around the house until I would slam myself in the room, and then he would just stay there for hours at a time, or at least make me think that he was outside my door for hours at a time. But then I'm kind of clumsy. So he likes to retell all these crazy stories of me falling down in the weirdest places and casts on my leg and how clumsy I was. And so he gets a kick out of that. So I love my brother Frank, but he,
So do you resist it?
But it's always like, I mean, at this point it's fun for me. And like, I'm like, okay, well, he's not going to chase me around anymore. He's to torment me, but now he doesn't, but he just gets a kick out of telling everybody the stupidest stories from when I was a kid.
So what do you think about the whole idea about meeting someone's family or siblings or parents or whatever prior to getting into a serious committed relationship? Because we talked about how there's kind of these two different people, and it's highlighted here, in this movie about how you really learn another angle or another aspect or facet of your partner when you do see them in these family contexts.
I do think it's actually really important. I think it's important to know how they think of their family. I think it's important to see how they interact with their family. I don't believe that they have to have great relationships or very strong bonds with their family, but I think you need to have an understanding of why that is. Like if you were to meet these people, would you understand why your partner has those feelings about these people? Do you see it, or do you think it's something that they're just living with? And so I think it's really important because, they say, you marry the family, or you live together with the family indefinitely if you're going to choose to go that way. But they are part of the life. I do think it's important to interact and get an idea of where the person comes from, because these are the people that help them emerge into the adults that they are. And you want to know, like, how were they raised? What were the viewpoints? And where did they get to today? Are they still in line with those people and they're wonderful people, or did they come up with things on their own? Do they stand against what their family is for? Like, what is that about? And so I think it's really important.
Would you say it would be a deal breaker if the person didn't want you to meet the family? If someone's going, oh, no, I don't want you to meet my parents or whatever.
I think it's a deal breaker if somebody leaves you out of any part of their life. If they say, no, you couldn't meet my work friends and you've been dating for a year, I'd be like, well, what's that about? Or no, you can't meet my family. Well, unless they say like dad's in prison for murder and mom is a child molester, like I'd say, well, I would really want to know where you come from.
Right.
I'd want to really know what that was about. I get that there are emotional cutoffs in families and we work with that all the time. And that can be okay, you can understand that, but you'd want to know, like, is the whole family against them, or are they against the whole family? Like, that's a loaded and a complex kind of situation. So if somebody says you can't meet any member of my family, I'd be like, well, there's something really bad back there, and I'd want to know why, and I'd want to hear what that explanation was.
Right. And how come you can't introduce this person or engage with your family and your partner and then come out of it and say, see, that's what goes on. That's why I can't do this, instead of shielding it. Because as therapists, we obviously see a lot with families, and so, we understand that sometimes people aren't safe. They have mental illness and they're just cruel, and it happens. People are drug addicts. People are not healthy. And so you don't want to be around them. But to not introduce, I think, is a big warning sign.
Shielding is one thing, but hiding is another. And so we'd want to pull apart the distinction there.
All right. And so to that end, there's a wonderful question that gets posed, and I think you and I will have fun chewing on this one.
It's not like you ever come around. You haven't been here in forever.
Okay, I cannot believe you told him about Cootie Kate.
How was I supposed to know you hadn't told him?
Like you would tell Jim you were Cootie Courtney.
Jim and I know everything there is to know about each other. He knows I slept with the entire water polo team, just like I knew he experimented with men.
I didn't need to know that.
Listen, Kate, my point is, after 3 years, I would think that you and Brad would know a little bit more about each other than you already do. How can you really appreciate someone for who they are until you really know them?
So do we have to know everything about the other person, or do we have to share everything about ourselves with our partner in order for them to actually know me and love me?
I think whether you do it on purpose or not, I think if you're with somebody long enough, you just kind of do. right? I
As
mean,
far
you've
as
been with
share
your
it?
wife like 25 years or something,
25
right?
plus, yeah.
Right. There's probably very little that you could pull out and say she doesn't know about you, right?
As far as character, yes. Stories, I'll sit down with friends and family. I'm like, oh, yeah, I didn't even remember that. So I couldn't have even told my wife that story about what happened to me or what I did.
Right, but that's not a purposeful exclusion.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that happens all the time. And I think there's that, right? And that's why it is important to get together with your past and, your families and your friends from childhood and kind of have people stay in your life, because there is that kind of like rich layer of like the stories that make up who you are that you can't remember all of them. So
Right. Like you slept with the entire football team or experimented with men, those.
I think that those things need to be told? Again, like I think if you're going to have a healthy relationship, it's going to be built on trust and honesty. And you can't have trust without honesty. I mean, you can, but usually find that it's fragile.
Yeah, it's thin.
So,
yeah.
So I think eventually all that stuff comes out.
In her example, she was saying that I slept with the entire water polo team or whatever they were. It's like, okay, well, that I don't know that I would want to know that, but that existed and it was part of who she was and what made her who she is. And she has to have the trust in me that I'm not so shallow to say, oh, you did that, we're done.
Exactly.
I mean, if it's kid touching or something like that, or robbing banks or, whatever, I understand it. But everybody has things that they're not proud of in their past that you kind of wait until you've put the relationship on solid ground before you reveal them. I mean, that would be a bad thing if you started every first date off by listing all your horrible experiences.
Right.
In your
I was
life.
just going to say that's not for second date material. Yeah.
No.
That's down the road. That's once you've made the decision that this person is worth going deeper with emotionally. And when you start sharing the not so proud moments of your life, or the moments you're proud of, but you probably wouldn't repeat if you had the opportunity with the team again,
Yeah, it may have been an accomplishment at the time, but
at the time she was quite proud of it.
Yes, but not in retrospect. So, so learning to be honest, we get it. We get what honesty is, right? Some people say, there's lies of omission and there's lies of commission, right? Mm-hmm. Things that I tell you that aren't true about me, that's a lie of commission. And then lies of omission is, oh, I forgot to bring that up about the football team. I just didn't tell you. I didn't intentionally omit it, but there's no way I can bring up everything. And so we get some of those values from our family. And I believe Kate is talking to her dad in this scenario. And he kind of lets her know that maybe the secrets that she thought she was keeping, she wasn't keeping.
Hey, kiddo.
Hey, Dad.
Did Brad leave to get a jump start on inoculating babies in Burma?
What?
Maybe he's making sock monkeys for foster kids, or weaving ponchos for pregnant women in the Yucatan.
So I guess you knew we were lying.
Oh, boy. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of experience bending the truth to avoid my family. And I'll tell you, honey, I would give anything to have that time back again.
I would too.
It's taken me a lot of years, several divorces, to learn that nothing really beats being honest. Honest about who you are, what you need. All the rest tends to work itself out.
I was honest. And I think he was too. It just wasn't what I wanted to hear.
I think that one of the things I talk to people when they're getting divorced, and I think is true for a lot of different areas. What I will tell you the truth about why I'm getting divorced today, and in 5 years I'll tell you the truth about why I got divorced. And those will be two different stories, right? Yes. So the truth kind of develops. And I found that, when something happens to me, or I'm an idiot in some way in my life and I'm ashamed of something that I've done, or I'm not proud of it, let's say, and I don't want to reveal it and I don't talk about it for a while, then the only thing that happens that changes is I learn to understand it differently. I learn to accept that about myself, and then I can go ahead and reveal it. And nothing's changed in the real world, right? The people that I'm afraid are going to judge me in a certain way, they haven't changed, but my understanding of it has changed. And so that way it helps me to know that I can be honest about who I am as soon as I'm comfortable with who I am and what I've done. And what he says in that clip is, I've gone through a lot of divorces, and I realized that being honest is really the way to go. That's the only way to save yourself. I think it's pretty powerful.
Yeah. And yeah, right. A powerful scene. It was a good acting and everything too. But as you're saying, I believe, like you do, that the truth changes over time, and that you're not lying in the present day for something that changes 5 years from now. It just develops. And self-awareness is that factor or self-awareness, self-love is that factor that helps you be as honest as you need to be.
Yeah, that's first has to be self-acceptance, right? I mean, if you dislike so many things about yourself that you can't reveal them to anyone,
right,
then you're going to be in trouble, because it doesn't matter if someone would accept you anyway. I mean, it's always my joke about like rehab. Rehab's a great place because you go and tell your awfulest stories, and people give you their number after, and they go, "Oh, you're so brave," and so whatever. I'm like, I just told you the crappiest things about my whole life and all the things I'm ashamed of, and you're making me a hero out of it. Sounds like a good deal to me. Let's go to rehab. So, it's that type of unconditional acceptance that we need to start with ourselves, and then show to other people, and then we can allow other people to know us. And if they disapprove of us or don't like us because of this truth and honesty that we have, then in the end, it's okay, because we're confident in who we are and what we're about, and people judging me can't change me.
That's the thing, is kind of holding on to that you've told the truth, your truth, and people can react however they want, but it doesn't change what you've done.
So one of the arguments for marriage is in favor of marriage, from living together and the rest of it, is it's kind of like relationships, and I feel this for every relationship, is that relationships are always in motion. It's like people want to ask, like, you're in the dating world again. It's like, well, where are we going with this? Where are we headed? What's our destination? What are we doing here? Those types of questions. But the truth is that people grow and develop, and consequently relationships grow and develop, and they're always moving in a different direction. And sometimes as people move down the road together in life, their purposes and their desires actually change. They're, like she ended the clip with that last one saying, I was being honest, and I think he was too. It's just that honest is different now.
Right. And we actually they have another scene that we're going to get to of what had happened and how they were different. But that changes all the time in relationships, and particularly this matter that they're going to talk about changes. Why don't we play that clip, and then we can talk about that.
No, I took a pregnancy test today.
You took what?
I took a pregnancy test today. At my mom's house. It was in my sister's bag. I was in the bathroom, and I'd been a couple days late, so I just thought I should probably, take a test. And
honey, you pulled the goalie?
What?
You can't pull the goalie without checking with your teammate. This is insane.
I did not pull the goalie. That's not what this conversation is about.
What are you talking about? What am I missing here?
Relax, Brad. It was negative. I'm not pregnant.
Well, geez, why don't you just hit me with that right from the start versus making me take laps around the anxiety pool?
What is this reaction?
Listen, if there's one thing we learned by being forced to be around our families today, it's about the dangers of procreating, all right? Besides, that's not the things that we want in life.
Oh, Brad, I realized it today. I thought for sure, I'd always known I didn't want to have kids, and then I took this test, and I'm waiting to see if it's positive or negative, and I thought, for just a second, I felt different. I felt hopeful. Like maybe it would just happen, and we'd be forced to get over all of our fears. We have spent so much of our relationship creating all these boundaries, making sure that we don't limit ourselves with responsibility and obligation, and I don't want to live like that anymore, because that's not loving at all.
Is that an 80s song?
No, Brad.
Are you throwing 80 songs at me?
I'm tired of being 1 foot in. I want us to be open, to love each other however it's going to be, and if one day that means that we get married, or if we have kids one day, I feel like that's okay. I want to be in a relationship that goes where it needs to go.
Okay. And I'd like the relationship to go to Fiji.
Brad, this is very important, and I want to have this conversation.
Okay, I don't want to have the conversation. I don't want to have it. I feel the same way that I did when we first met. I've been honest the whole time. I don't want to have a conversation about it because I don't want those things.
It sounds very hippie to me when she said, you know, I want to be in a relationship that goes where it needs to go. But then I thought, you know what? As a therapist, I always look at the relationship as a third entity, right? So you have both partners, they're each their own person and their entity. But then there's this relationship which is its own third entity. And when she said, I just want to be in a relationship that goes where it needs to go, I'm like, that seems kind of directionless because you have two people that can drive it. But in the end, really, relationships, you know, people always look for blame and whose fault it is. I'm like, well, this relationship didn't work. You know, the relationship, I mean, as therapists, we have to define am I counseling one person of the couple or the other person of the couple, or is the relationship itself my client, and that's who I'm working with? You know, so it's interesting. I always like the way that comedy movies bring these psychological principles that we deal with on a day-to-day basis to life in a humorous way, like pulling the goalie and all the rest of it. You know, so it just that made me think, oh, okay, so just because a relationship is in one place at one time doesn't mean that it's not moving on down the road, whether you choose to move it down the road or not.
Right. And what we're hearing is, you know, something that's very common in couples, because I thought about this and I think my reaction to this was, oh, you know, like, because there's another scene after this, but about that, this is really like a Hollywood kind of ending. But the reality is that people do set out in relationships and they think that they have the same goals. Like theirs was no kids. They didn't want to have kids. For Vince Vaughn's character, he really has held on to that and hasn't changed that. So for him, he doesn't even want to have the conversation because he's like, well, this is a conversation that doesn't fit into the relationship that he's having, because the relationship that he's chosen to be in is one where he knew the end goal was not going to result in kids. And for Reese Witherspoon's character, she is growing in a different way. And for her, this idea has come up that maybe she wants to be a mother or she wants them to be parents together. And she needs to have the ability and the freedom and the safety to bring that up to him. So she's getting, you know, so she got like hit hard with, you know, the shutdown from him, which, you know, can be very painful because these things happen all the time in relationships, that people change the course of the relationship. One person veers off in a different direction, right? The relationship has legs and it walked them in a different direction. And the other person hasn't caught up with them, and maybe they won't catch up with them. Maybe they're going off in a different direction and they never will kind of meet up and decide that they both will move forward doing that. I've definitely worked with people who ended relationships because that child situation came up. And the person really held on to and said, I don't believe in bringing children into the world, so I'm not going to do it. And the person left and found someone to have a baby with. And they went on and had their life. And this happens quite frequently.
Yeah, and I think that oftentimes, you know, you do premarital counseling. Like people want to come in and make sure it's going to work, and none of us have crystal balls, and we can't tell them whether they're going to make it. But there's a couple things that I look at right off the bat, and one is, do you have a difference in raising children, or do you have difference in religious beliefs? A lot of times, those two things are going to be they're deal breakers. You know, I have to have kids. Well, you can't have kids with someone who doesn't want to have kids, and then if you have a religion, your faith changes or modifies or influences almost every decision you make. And if you guys are on opposite sides in that realm too, but beyond that, most of the time people can get through things, you know, but what happened in this situation is she changed the rules of the game, which I think when couples come to me, I say, well, that's the norm. People do change. People do grow. I don't want to be married to the same 25-year-old woman that I was married to when I took my vows. I want her to grow and change and develop, but sometimes that's not always comfortable.
Right. And that's what you were saying about the truth changing for a person. She got in that relationship with him like 3-4 years ago and never wanted to have kids. And now she couldn't. So no matter what kind of premarital counseling they might have done before, she might have said, yeah, we're in a relationship. We don't want kids. We're simpatico. It's good. And then 3-4 years later, her truth is now different for who she is in the world at this point. Now, I was going to say on your end, you don't want to be married to the same 25-year-old, but I bet your friends would give you a good time if you were.
Yeah, exactly.
25, right?
Yeah, exactly. The 25-year-old.
They think you were quite the stud if you had the same 25-year-old.
Yeah, physically, we all go downhill after a certain point in time. We do the best we can, but our and that's the other thing is youth is often, it's like looking when I was my kid's age, 17. If I thought a 40-year-old woman was attractive, that would be crazy. I would never think that, and now as I get older, I'm like, well, that's a pretty hot 40-year-old, 50-year-old, whatever. It's just you change, things are different because you can not only just look at the outside, but you go, oh my gosh, I listen to some of the conversations my kids have with girls, and I'm like, this is inane. I'm batting my head against the wall. This is torture. I don't care what you look like. This is brutal. So so we all change, grow, and develop. And before we get to the last clip and we get to our wonderful Hollywood ending, why don't you tell the folks how they can get a hold of us and introduce your show that's separate from this one, and I'll introduce mine.
You can find me at coachingthroughchaos.com, and I'm also the host of the Coaching Through Chaos podcast. We have 40 episodes, and it's interviews designed to motivate, empower, and inspire the audience. We are launching season 3 the first Tuesday of January in 2017. So we took a little bit of a break, but that was to line up some really cool guests and kind of reformat the show a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that, and we'll talk more about that as we get closer to it. And you can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Dr. Colleen Mullen. And of course, we're at Shrink to Shrink. On Twitter, it's shrink2 with the number 2, shrink. And we also have shrinktoshrink.com. And Courtney can tell you about his other podcast.
And I can be reached at QuadfatherMFT on Twitter, and it's Quadcast Podcast, and that's on whatever app you guys want to find it on. And it's just me and my buddy Swanee. We just tell stories from our lives, make fun of each other, and sometimes we bring some psychological stuff in. And he works in brain surgery, and he's got 2 families in 2 different locations, so I always get to pick on him for that. Maybe that doesn't quite fit with Shrink to Shrink.
That sounds good. I think I want to talk to him. What does that mean?
Yeah, no kidding. We can be found there. And I just want to give a special shout out. I was on Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks DAPF podcast on Twitter, and they had me on and loved to. They really enjoy Shrink to Shrink, and I think you were on George and Tony something. What was that?
That's right. I was on the George and Tony Entertainment Show, and that episode comes out this coming Monday. So the last Monday of not Thanksgiving, the last Monday of November.
November 28th.
So you can hear me, and we're talk about what Coaching Through Chaos is about, and also a lot about what Shrink to Shrink is about. It was a fun episode to do. So we want to shout out to Dark Angels and Pretty Freaks and the George and Tony Entertainment Show
for having us on. All right. So now it wouldn't be a Hollywood comedy movie if it didn't leave you if it didn't leave you with a smile. Hopefully it left you with a little warm spot in the right place, your heart.
Okay, listen. If you get one, you might as well get 2 because they're like dogs.
What are you talking about?
I'm talking about kids. If you leave one by itself at home, you're never going to leave because you're going to feel so guilty about it being there by itself. But if there's 2, you don't feel bad because they got someone to play with. The other big thing to think about is school. Like, do you send them to private school? Because then you got sweater vest and lacrosse coming at you all day. But if you go to public school, you got to worry about some art student who's hyperactive, who's all hopped up on medications. You might try to shank the little guy, and that's uncomfortable too.
Are you having this conversation with me because you're comfortable having this conversation with me? Or are you just having this conversation with me because you want to go to Fiji?
I want to go to Fiji. Because the tickets are already paid for and, the hotel rooms aren't transferable. But, honey, I do feel comfortable now, I think, having this conversation because in my heart I know that I found the one person in life that I want to have these conversations with. And that person's you. I love you so much.
that was a good comeback to the end of the previous conversation. Like, I don't want to have this conversation, so we're not going to have it. I would suggest to him in that previous clip that, hey, I'm not ready to have this conversation right now, but I want to talk to you maybe Saturday about it or something like that. That's better communication, because he took a little while. There are people who have to process things. I'm a perceiver. I'm not a concluder. So I take a while, I chew on things, and then I can come up with a better decision. But if people force me to make decisions right or change my mindset right away, I stick my feet to the ground. I'm like, I'm not changing, and I don't want to talk about it because I'm not going to make a change. And in this clip, he was able to kind of process and come back to a change, and he actually made some modifications in how he believed.
Right, and he did it very quickly. I mean, it's a Hollywood movie, so he did it in the same evening where he's showing up on her doorstep doing it. But it's great when people can say, hey, I want to come back to you. And I think you might have touched on that before, where if you're hit with one of those things where like you have to reevaluate and say, is our whole relationship changing? And you might have to say, hey, I can't even think about this right now. Like, what you've given me is information I can't really compute. Now, I'm the opposite of you. I kind of like to deal with it in the moment. So for me, having those partners that say, hey, I'll get back to you on Saturday, it absolutely kills me. But I know it's healthy. So I get through it. And I teach people that all the time. Like, you have to if you're with a person who is more of a thinking, processing kind of person, you have to give them that space. And you have to know that, like, if she had dug her heels in and be like, well, he didn't want to have that talk and he's done. And then he showed up 2 days later and said, oh, but hey, baby, let's have this conversation and let's talk about having kids. If she had said, well, no, because he couldn't do it in that time, because you told me you didn't want to talk about it. Now I don't believe you. I don't trust you, because people do that all the time. Then she's shooting herself in the foot and losing out then on the future relationship with the guy. You have to understand how you think and how your partner thinks.
Yeah, and I work with couples who are quite hostile towards each other, and they want to fight and argue things out. And I tell them, you guys have to have a de-escalation plan, meaning that if you're not going to resolve this, because my wife is like you, she wants to fix it right now and resolve it right now, and if it doesn't get done, it's going to be hanging out there, and she can't go on unless we have this decision made. Well, I tell my couples, okay, so if you're not going to resolve it right now, you have to say, I'll talk to you on Tuesday about it, or give me a few hours to think about it. Because in the extreme, what you end up with is someone who says, all right, I'm just going to get in the car and go, and the other person's on the hood of the car going, we're going to fix this right now, and that never ends well.
No, and you have to let the person who wants to fix it all right now needs to have the assurance that conversation is going to happen in the future. Because if you just say, no, I can't do this right now, and you walk away, that person is left really with a lot of anxiety. But if you say, hey, I promise you next week we can talk about it, I just need to think about it, right, then the person who needs the answer right now can get about their business. They can go, okay, they'll come back to me, and maybe they can go a step further and say, hey, can we do it on Tuesday? We'll both be home. Can we talk on Tuesday? What works for you? And kind of line it up so that there is that coming back together to know that they're going to be able to have a say about that topic that they need to talk about.
Yeah, so, and despite the fact that I was not a big fan of this movie, I wouldn't watch it again. I think there are a lot of rich topics, and hopefully it'll help all of us survive the holidays and thrive in the holidays as we engage with our family, or don't, based on if we want to go to Fiji or not. So to that
I like that. I want the relationship to go to Fiji.
Yeah, exactly. The relationship should go to Fiji. We just got to visit my parents right before or after. So I'll say that. I'll say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you and all of our listeners in this wonderful, joyous, pretend to be happy, although oftentimes miserable and depressing season that we're about to enter here in December.
Oh, come on, Courtney. So Merry Christmas to you, and Happy Holidays to everybody out there. Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, everything else. And we'll be back then on the last day of the year. So we're going to have New Year's Year's Eve show launch will be our next episode.
That's right. We'll find some New Year's movie or something that makes us think about new beginnings or something like that.
That's right.
So,
right. And this episode launches on the last day of November, and we launch all the episodes on the last day of the month. So,
and until we see you
the next time,
we'll save a seat on the movie couch for you.